Hello friends and enemies. For today's video, we are going back in time all the way back to 1983. That's right, we are talking about the sole self-titled release by short-lived 1980s act Psh Psh from Venezuela. This is more proto-goth in sound than full-on goth, but I think it is relevant enough in terms of inspiration that I can talk about it here on this channel. This album had been re-released in 2019 by Caracas, Venezuela-based indie record label Humano Derecho Records, with the download being free of charge. According to the Bandcamp page, Psh Psh was an all-female post-punk and new wave act. Apparently, the name of the band, according to the notes on the Bandcamp release of the album, was meant to be based on the sound that men make when trying to get a woman's attention. The members were lead singer and bassist Ofelia Brito, and the initial guitarist was Paz Alejandra Hidalgo, later replaced by Tania Diachichi. The initial drummer was Esther Cohen, later replaced by Lorena Jimeno Chachone, the latter of whom was also a member of El Enano de la Catedral, which I would love to talk more about here in the future if I could find more than 2 songs by them. Before we get any further, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more information related to goth, and in some cases, goth adjacent and proto-goth, how I'd categorize today's band, music from Latin America. This is a pretty interesting little album. Content warning. There are references to mental illness, suicide, machine takeovers, and police brutality in these songs that come up, so brace yourselves. It's a bit funny seeing posts from people complaining, why are so many musicians these days so serious and political? Why can't it just be about the music? Well, here's an album from the 1980s that definitely touched on some issues, and they were far from the first, but I digress. The first song is Caracas, which, for those of you who missed it, is the capital of Venezuela. The melody is pretty fun with an early punk sound, almost proto-punk 1960s-ish in the vocals. The lyrics I would not describe as overly complimentary to the city, describing constant illness due to pollution and crazy drivers. The next song is Guerra Mental, meaning mental war. There is a vocal back and forth between a more peppy sound and this deranged sound, which fits because it is describing intense feelings of anxiety and mental anguish. Again, we have some melodic dissonance as the song is all in major keys and half the vocals sound extremely perky, but the lyrics are pretty upset, talking about not being able to deal with any more of one's unhappy mental state. One line that stood out to me is a reference to the world being crazy, so as with the previous song, dealing with pollution and crazy drivers, maybe we are supposed to pick up that this person's anguish is due, at least in part, due to external factors. The following song is Juego de computadora, meaning computer game. This song lyrically describes computers taking jobs from humans because they're efficient and don't get tired, which eventually leads to a full-on takeover by the machines. It's a bit funny that some people think the concept of automation is so new, but here's a song from the 1980s discussing it. The next 2 songs are Hombres, which means men, and Hospital, which means hospital. As it so happens, the lyrics for these songs are not listed, so I had to seek out someone who both does not have auditory processing disorder and who habla español bien and available. I found one person for whom both qualifies and who was available to help me, and it just so happens that due to the older, low-budget nature of the recordings, she couldn't really clearly hear the lyrics to the first song, and the second song, all she could understand was that the person was in the hospital and someone was responding with names of a bunch of illnesses, though the additional lyrics providing further context were unintelligible. Ofelia Brito herself did mention in the notes that some of the recordings were rehearsals and not great. After that is Luz en la autopista, meaning light on the highway. The narrator of the song describes getting on the bus and looking over the city to see lots of contradictory things, such as people who are rich and famous, but also people who are starving and political arrests and repression going on, while the narrator just wants to be living free. The melody of the song gives me a dub reggae vibe, pretty typical of early post-punk. The next song on the album is Oigo Voices, Esquizofrenia in parentheses, meaning I hear voices, and schizophrenia. This song is about a schizophrenic person tormented by voices telling them to kill themselves until eventually they do and the voices finally leave them alone. There is a note on the album where Ofelia Brito mentions somewhat regretting writing this song because when she was studying in university, she went to a psychiatric ward and came across a patient who was schizophrenic and had been a fan of the band and told Brito that she had attempted suicide thinking that the voices that tormented her would leave her alone if she killed herself like the character in the song. In her note, note, Brito mentions a few other anecdotes about suicidal people in her life and how suicide is not the answer, and I second that message. Perhaps fittingly, this song is the one that's the closest to sounding actually pretty dark in terms of melody and vocal stylings. The back and forth happens again, this time with there being more concrete characters than the others. The following song is Millonario, meaning millionaire. This song is about how money can't buy you happiness, and having too much of it will eventually spoil you as a person. The final original song on the album is Religiones, meaning religion. The song talks about how religion brings war and misery. The actual final song is another version of Oigo Voces on keyboards. That definitely adds a more creepy sound and feel to the song. At the time, this band was labeled as punk, though they apparently did not like being referred to as such. Nowadays, I have seen this band labeled as post-punk and even new wave. They do have a song that I would categorize with earlier post-punk, and they have this definite quirky vibe, like in the early new wave bands. Technically, both of those genres, especially the earlier ones that we would associate with this particular sound, came a lot earlier in other countries, but keep in mind this was the 1980s, before the internet was a thing, or at least common thing, and media and pop culture traveled differently, so this particular sound popped up in South America at a different time than, say, certain European countries. They reminded me of a bit of the punk bands The Nuns and also the Barbies, another short-lived band. I do think it's a shame that they were not able to stick around longer, but that's what happens sometimes, especially in the underground music world. In the notes, Brito mentioned that there was an attempt to sign them with a label, but they wanted the music to change in a way that the band did not wish to conform to. I know plenty of independent musicians these days who've had similar experiences, so I guess such is the experience of creating alternative music. That was Psh Psh. If you want to listen to this album, it is free on Bandcamp. It was briefly available for not free by a Spanish record label on cassette, but it sold out really fast. I searched, and it does not appear to be on any official streaming platforms. There are some unofficial uploads here on YouTube, but not YouTube Music or anything like that. I cannot find any existing social media accounts connected to this band, which makes sense. If you want to follow me elsewhere on social media, my link tree is in the description down below. If you like this video, please do like, comment, and subscribe. Maybe even share this video with some of your friends who might like it as well. My birthday is coming up soon, being September 23rd, depending on when you see this. So that would be a great birthday present. Until next time, bye now.